Hello, and welcome back to the Gut Health Dialogues. This month, we're talking all about methane SIBO, and you may have caught our last episode called What is Methane SIBO? It was all about methane and how it's a hidden diagnosis behind bloating and constipation. And today, we're going to talk all about how to calm down those methane SIBO symptoms with diet. So, if you've been diagnosed with methane-dominant SIBO, which is also called intestinal methanogen overgrowth or EMO, or suspect it might be part of the picture, you're probably feeling overwhelmed by all the conflicting diet advice. Should I go low FODMAP? Should I go low carb, low fiber, no sugar? And the deeper you dig, the more it starts to feel like your only option is to eat air and sadness. And the truth is, there's no official evidence-based methane SIBO diet. Methane SIBO is a type of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. When it comes to diet, there's just a lot of conflicting advice, and most of it is not written by dietitians. Many people turn to the low FODMAP diet, while others may experiment with stricter approaches, like there's a specific carbohydrate diet or SIBO-specific diets, which combine elements of the low FODMAP with the specific carbohydrate diet while also reducing carbs. But none of these were specifically designed for methane SIBO, and sometimes they can leave nutritional gaps. In this episode today, I'm going to break down how we turn that confusion into a clear real world plan that works for our clients. And I've also created for you a special methane SIBO diet plan. So we're going to link to that in the show notes. Definitely feel free to download that if you just want to hit the ground running. Because the right diet, when used strategically, can reduce methane SIBO symptoms, symptoms like constipation, bloating, abdominal pain, and pressure, without starving your microbiome or spiraling you into nutrient depletion. As a registered dietitian who's been specializing in gut health for over 10 years, I work with methane SIBO clients every single day. And I want to walk you through what actually helps and what doesn't. So today we're going to break down the core principles of a methane SIBO friendly diet, what to say yes to, why certain foods cause issues, and how to build real meals that feel doable and satisfying. So by the end, you're going to understand the why behind this eating plan and have a clear path forward with a companion food list and 7-day meal inspiration to bring it all to life. That's in the show notes. So let's dive in. So let's first talk about how the methane SIBO diet differs from standard low FODMAP, because most people who start researching SIBO end up landing on the low FODMAP diet, and for a good reason. It's one of the most widely used strategies for reducing gas, bloating, and discomfort, which are some of the hallmark SIBO symptoms. But when it comes to methane dominant SIBO, a standard low FODMAP approach often is not enough. The low FODMAP diet was originally designed to help people with irritable bowel syndrome or IBS by reducing fermentable carbohydrates, specifically, and I'm going to try not to mess this up, fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. Oh, that's what FODMAP stands for. It's an acronym, and these are short chain carbohydrates that are poorly absorbed in the small intestine and become food for hydrogen producing gut bacteria. So that's a key right there. Hydrogen producing gut bacteria, when they ferment FODMAPs, they release hydrogen gas, which can lead to bloating, pressure, and loose stools, especially if they're overgrown in the small intestine where gas can get trapped. So in hydrogen dominant SIBO, cutting down on these fermentable carbs can significantly reduce symptoms by limiting the fuel source for those bacteria. Less fermentation means less gas, and for many people, that translates into real digestive relief. But methane SIBO works differently. Methane producing microbes, specifically Methanobrevibacter smithii, don't actually ferment food. Instead, they feed on hydrogen gas that the other bacteria produce. So even though they aren't eating your food directly, they do rely on the byproducts of fermentation to survive. And here's the important piece. In nearly every case of methane SIBO, hydrogen-producing bacteria are still present too. You need both types for methane to be produced, the hydrogen producers to produce the gas, and the methane producers to convert it into methane. In fact, this can be true even if hydrogen doesn't show up on the breath test because methane producers are often so efficient at consuming it that the hydrogen gets used up before it can be measured. So methane SIBO is usually identified with a lactulose breath test where elevated methane levels point to overgrowth. And oftentimes we see methane elevated and sometimes there is zero hydrogen showing up, but we know those hydrogen producers are almost always present. It's just that the breath test is not able to measure any detectable hydrogen because it's already been converted into methane. So to visualize this, try to imagine your gut as a campsite. Fermentable carbs like FODMAPs or resistant starches are the wood you bring to the fire. Hydrogen-producing bacteria are like the campers tossing that wood onto the fire. The more carbs you feed them, the more fuel they have to burn and the more smoke or hydrogen gas they produce. Methane producing microbes are like a crew standing nearby with a vacuum sucking up the smoke. They don't need the wood or the fire, they just need the hydrogen gas and release methane in return. Now, let's say you go on a low FODMAP diet. That's like limiting how much wood you bring to the campsite. The fire dies down a little, there's less smoke, but not zero. And the vacuum crew, it is still going strong. Methane producers are so efficient they can keep working even with small amounts of hydrogen. So the methane production and the slowed motility that comes with it often continue. And even on a well-executed low FODMAP diet, there are still opportunities for fermentation. Not all fermentable carbs are completely removed. That's why it's called a low FODMAP, not a no FODMAP. So some moderate FODMAP foods may still be included in small portions. And when those portions stack up across meals, or if somebody eats larger amounts than expected, it can lead to more hydrogen gas than intended. Plus, foods that aren't technically high FODMAP, like resistant starches, for example, can still ferment and feed hydrogen-producing bacteria. For someone with hydrogen dominant SIBO, this might still be enough to bring real symptom relief. Reducing fermentation means less gas, less bloating, and fewer bathroom emergencies, even if some hydrogen is still being produced in small amounts. And for many people, that's a meaningful win. But for methane dominant SIBO, even that small amount of hydrogen can be enough to keep methane production going. And that's where things get tricky. On top of that, methane itself slows down gut motility. That means food and bacteria hang out in the small intestine longer, giving even small amounts of fermentable material more time to cause issues. It becomes a slow, stubborn cycle that a basic low FODMAP diet often can't break. And that's why so many people with methane SIBO don't notice significant relief just with following the low FODMAP diet. Not only are they sensitive to even the smallest amounts of fermentation, which can still be happening on a low FODMAP diet, but everything's kind of stuck. And so everything is having extra time to ferment. They find themselves stuck. You're following the rules, you're eating the safe foods, maybe even feeling a little better at first, but your constipation, bloating, or pressure never fully resolves. A methane SIBO diet has to go beyond just removing fermentable carbs. It needs to address the following things. First of all, moderate FODMAP foods, which can still trigger symptoms if eaten in very large portions or too often. So balance and variety matter here more than strict avoidance. We're not saying to go uber low FODMAP or no FODMAP. However, we want to be careful not to get large portions of these moderate FODMAP foods. And the easiest way, the most practical way to do that without driving yourself crazy is balance and variety. So small amounts of lots of different things. FODMAP stacking across meals and snacks is another potential issue because these can add up. So again, the goal isn't to micromanage every bite, but small amounts of different foods are usually better tolerated than bigger servings of one. Also, high-fat meals. These can actually slow motility and worsen constipation, even if fermentation is low. So this is something that comes into play. Even though fats are not fermentable, they do have an impact on especially upper digestive motility. Meal composition, aiming for balance and avoiding extremes like oversized carb-heavy meals, those can cause a problem because there's lots of fermentation, or even very low carb, high protein meals can cause a problem because they're going to have a lot of fat as well, be harder to digest and slow digestion and therefore slowing motility. The fiber form matters. In these situations with methane SIBO, we want to prioritize gentle, soluble fibers over rough, insoluble ones that can worsen bloating or slow motility. Meal timing and spacing is important because this can help support the migrating motor complex and keep digestion moving. Some of you may hear me talk about the migrating motor complex. That is the cleaning wave that typically goes through the small intestine that is interfered with in many SIBO cases. And so when we talk about it, we're talking about small intestinal motility, and meal timing and spacing is a helpful strategy to help optimize and increase that motility so that things aren't as stagnant. Hydration is critical here, especially warm fluids early in the day, which can trigger the gastrocolic reflex and get things going early on to support bowel regularity. And we also need to actively support motility in many cases. So we're thinking beyond fermentation with methane SIBO, and we're thinking about really supporting motility. So this is where a more targeted approach really makes a difference, and why you might still be struggling even when you're doing the right thing for the general SIBO recommendations. So, what are the core goals of the methane SIBO diet? The goal of a methane SIBO diet is not to starve your gut or eliminate every carb. That is not what we're about. It's to be strategic, to reduce symptoms, support regular motility, and give your body a more favorable environment for healing. And these principles are central to managing methane SIBO in daily life. The first goal is to reduce available hydrogen by limiting fermentation from carbs and resistant starch. Methane producing microbes don't ferment food directly. Remember, they rely on hydrogen gas created when other bacteria break down fermentable carbs. The more you feed those hydrogen producers, the more methane gets made. That's why this diet focuses on cutting back the types of carbs and fibers that drive fermentation, like FODMAPs and resistant starches, especially the ones that bypass digestion and ferment in the colon. So that basically boils down to limiting fermentation from carbs and resistant starch, helping to reduce methane levels. But also, we want to support motility and regular bowel movements. Methane gas slows intestinal transit, and slow motility makes everything worse. More fermentation, more gas, more symptoms. So, this diet includes foods and patterns that gently support movement, warm fluids, soluble fiber, consistent rhythms, and avoiding meal patterns that bog things down. Supporting motility is just as important as managing fermentation. We also want to reduce pressure, bloating, and trapped gas. The hallmark methane SIBO symptoms often include bloating, fullness, abdominal pain, and that backed up heavy sensation that never fully goes away. By reducing gas production and improving motility, this diet helps relieve that pressure. Less gas buildup, less distension, and less discomfort after meals. And we want to maintain nutritional adequacy without over restriction. One of the biggest traps with SIBO diets is going too far, cutting out too many foods, losing weight unintentionally, or feeling too anxious to eat. We see this all the time in our practice, and that only makes things worse in the long run. The methane SIBO diet should still include enough variety to nourish your gut lining, support digestion, and keep your energy up. So the goal is to streamline the diet, not shrink it down to nothing, so that it stays both nourishing and doable. So remember, we do have a 7-day methane SIBO diet plan. It has a food guide, a food list, and 7 days worth of meal plans. So make sure to download that. It's in the show notes. So let's talk about the core principles of the diet, of the methane SIBO diet. These principles are what guide the food choices in a methane SIBO friendly diet. This is not about rigid rules. It's about being strategic so that meals work with your gut instead of against it. Each principle is designed to reduce gas production, support motility, and keep your diet as complete and nourishing as possible. So here's the framework that guides everything in that plan. First, we want to modify fiber intake, not eliminate fiber. So some versions of SIBO diets, like the low residue diet, essentially eliminates fiber from the diet, reduces it significantly. Well, cutting out fiber completely can backfire in methane SIBO, as it often makes constipation work. Not to mention, then we're also starving our healthy gut bacteria in the large intestine, which means depleting our microbiome, making our gut more vulnerable and less resilient over time. So the key is to be selective. Focus on cooked, soft, soluble fibers like peeled zucchini, carrots, or oats. Avoid raw, stringy, or dense, insoluble fibers that are harder to break down and can create more pressure or sluggishness. We also want to limit resistant starch. Resistant starches are starches that are not fully digested in the small intestine, so they can reach the colon and ferment there. And that's where they can feed hydrogen producing bacteria. And that hydrogen can then be used by methane producing microbes, which often live in the same neighborhood. So while it's an indirect process, these foods can increase methane production in sensitive guts. And remember, now we're classifying methane SIBO as even overgrowth that happens in the large intestine. That's why it's now being called EMO, or intestinal methanogen overgrowth. We also want to have a moderate fat intake. So while fat itself doesn't ferment, high fat meals can slow down stomach emptying. In people prone to constipation or methane SIBO, that extra sluggishness in the upper gut can add to the sense of heaviness and discomfort. And this is especially notable with some of the strictest SIBO diet plans that only allow protein foods and low FODMAP vegetables. It's really easy to end up overdoing fat and protein when carbs are so limited. So you end up with almost a keto style diet, and now you're having this extra slowed motility from just the high fat content. So instead, we want to aim for balance with moderate amounts of fat from well tolerated sources like olive oil or small portions of avocado. We also want to have balanced meals. So both ends of the spectrum can cause problems. Large starchy meals with little protein can spike fermentation, while low carb, high fat meals slow digestion. So we want to aim for balanced plates with protein, small portions of tolerated carbs, gentle fiber, and some fat. And this helps stabilize digestion and reduces extremes that lead to flares. We also want to choose easy to digest foods. During symptom management, when you're flaring, softer is better. Go for well-cooked veggies, peeled fruits, lean proteins, and simple familiar ingredients. So think soups, stews, mashable meals, not raw salads or crunchy snack bars. You can always expand later, but comfort and digestibility come first. We also want to support motility through hydration and meal spacing. Small things can make a big difference here. Warm fluids in the morning can help kickstart motility, and spacing meals away from each other by 3 to 4 hours instead of grazing allows that MMC, the gut's natural cleansing wave, to do its job between meals. These gentle habits can make your entire day run more smoothly. Now, let's talk about some common pitfalls that people run into with methane SIBO, because even with the right information, it's easy to slip into patterns that actually make methane SIBO worse. These are the most common mistakes I see. Number one is going too low in fiber and worsening constipation. Remember, cutting fiber out completely can backfire. The key is choosing the right types, gentle fibers, soluble fibers, not avoiding it altogether. Next, skipping meals or grazing all day. those are two opposite things, right? But not having the correct meal timing. Constant snacking interferes with the migrating motor complex, the cleaning wave in the gut, because that cleaning wave only activates during fasting. That's why I recommend spacing meals out 3 to 4 hours. Without it, things stay stagnant and symptoms can build up. Skipping meals also is not helpful because meals also stimulate the gastrocolic reflex, which is what signals everything to move along. So if you're not eating, you're also missing those motility signals. Over restricting and under eating is another issue. So eating too little can slow motility, and it can also trigger fatigue, and it can also worsen bloating. So, gosh, I just can't tell you how much I see people under eating with gut issues. And it makes sense because it hurts when you eat, but this can actually make the problem worse. So that's why I've created this meal plan for you to help guide you on what's safe to eat. I do find that when we work with people, once they understand what's safe to eat, it helps them break out of that over restriction. The over restriction just comes from not knowing what to do. Assuming that healthy equals safe, this is another really common pitfall. And I'm just going to come out and say, I know it's not fair. It's not fair because with methane SIBO, the healthier the foods, very often the worse the symptoms are. We see this time and time again. Beans, kale salads, coconut flour, quinoa bowls, nuts, seeds. This roughage is certainly healthy. It has many health benefits when you have a healthy, well-functioning digestive tract. But these are the very foods that can be the most fermentable and cause the most gas production when you have methane SIBO. Also, we just want to keep in mind the basics. So that's hydration, warm fluids, regular rhythms, and balancing meals all matter just as much as the food type. And let's not forget underlying factors. This is by far one of the biggest issues that I see is that SIBO is addressed through maybe antibiotics, maybe diets, and all of that is valid. But we forget to think about why did this SIBO happen in the first place and what can we do to prevent it from coming back? Because slow motility is one of the biggest drivers of methane SIBO. Other things can also contribute to causing methane SIBO. For example, if you have scar tissue or adhesions from past surgeries, gut-brain signaling issues, chronic stress, things like low stomach acid, maybe just from getting older, we produce less stomach acid as we age, or long-term PPI use, and even certain medications can all increase the risk of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And if these root contributors are not addressed, diet changes alone rarely lead to lasting progress. And even antimicrobials and antibiotics will clear the SIBO in the moment. But if you're still experiencing that slow motility or some of these other root contributors, then it's just going to grow right back. So one of the things that we do at Nutrition Resolution in our practice is we make sure with every SIBO patient that alongside addressing SIBO, fully clearing the overgrowth, helping work through the different phases of the diet, elimination, reintroduction, expanding the diet, rebuilding the gut microbiome. We are also doing a root cause assessment and putting together a maintenance and relapse prevention plan to greatly reduce the risk of relapse. And we see when we do all of that, we see a very low risk of relapse. So now that we've talked about all of this, let's talk about what this looks like in real life. How do we put this into practice? We want to start by applying the core principles to shape your meals throughout the day. That means building meals around soft cooked vegetables, well-tolerated grains, and lean proteins. Using healthy fats in moderation, enough to feel satisfied, but not so much that it slows things down. Spacing meals 4 to 5 hours apart or 3 to 4 hours apart when possible to support motility and avoid constant fermentation. Staying hydrated with warm fluids throughout the day, especially in the morning, and keeping fiber gentle and consistent using foods like peeled zucchini, carrots, or oatmeal rather than raw salads or high resistant sources. And if you're looking for a way to put this into practice, remember to download the meal plan in the show notes. If you've been dealing with the slow, bloated, constipated misery of methane SIBO, changing your diet can offer real relief. But food is just the starting point. This plan is designed to calm things down, reduce fermentation, ease pressure, and support motility. But it's not a cure. For true lasting relief, you need to rebalance the gut environment, clear methane overgrowth once it's confirmed, and address the root cause that allow it to develop in the first place. That includes deeper work on motility, gut-brain signaling, and bacterial balance. Those are key steps if you actually want to fully address methane SIBO rather than just managing it. And addressing SIBO fully is something we help clients with every day. So if you're not sure what to do next, feel free to book a free 15-minute strategy call with me and we can talk it through. We also have some other episodes coming up to round out our discussion about methane SIBO. So we're going to talk in an upcoming episode about how to actually start healing methane SIBO. The diet that we talked about today is to help calm down the symptoms. But all these things I'm talking about, as far as how do we actually clear it and get rid of it for good, stay tuned because that is up and coming. And we're also going to talk about why methane SIBO can lead to weight gain. So in digestive health, certainly with SIBO, a lot of people actually struggle with unintentional weight loss just in general, because when you have digestive issues, it's hard to eat enough and people experience weight loss. With methane SIBO, though, we often see unintentional weight gain. I'm going to explain why in an upcoming episode and what can be done about it. So stay tuned and we'll see you next time.